In studio with us, it's Executive Vice President and General Manager Nick Caserio. Nick, great to see you. How's it going?
Fellas, good to be here.
Well, on to New England, but not quite yet. Let's review for a moment the victory over the Bills and some mistakes in the fourth quarter, but down the stretch, you were basically flawless, and Fairbairn hits the game winner.
Yeah, a number of contributions from a number of different players. Played well situationally there at the end of the game. Third quarter kind of hit a rough patch. The 2 turnovers were a big part of the game, so kind of gave them some life, put them in a position. Then the fourth quarter, we were really able to execute in all 3 phases. We were able to get stops on defense with John. That was something we talked about before the game. We'll be able to get stops and then get the ball back for the offense. The offense was able to convert the opportunities, and then the special teams were a huge part of the finish there. Punt return, a completion, and then Kaimi with a clutch kick. So we talked about going into the game, it was going to take pretty much everybody, and hopefully we were going to be able to play complementary football, and that was on display there in the fourth quarter against a good football team.
Nick, we thought about it during the game, like, okay, Josh is not doing really, really well, or okay, you look up at the end, you're like, he's 9-30 for 131, had the 1 touchdown where he hit Keon, which was more about Keon than it was about Josh. What was the key in really slowing him down? Because he had been in, obviously, an MVP level, all that kind of stuff in the games prior. But he was 9-30, 30% against you guys. What was kind of the key in slowing him down in the passing game?
Sure. I mean, he's a great player, and we knew in order to have success as a team, we're going to have to take him away offensively in some respects. He gained a lot of yards, on the ground, which going into the game we knew was going to be a little bit of an issue. But from the passing game standpoint, DR talks about this a lot, the coordination between the rush and the coverage. So we were tight on the receivers. The rush was able to get maybe around the quarterback. We only had the 1 sack, but we were able to kind of disrupt the quarterback. So when you put those 2 dynamics together, it leads to good pass defense. So it's a credit to the front. It's a credit to the linebackers are a big part of that as well. Aziz had a number of plays where he was tracking the quarterback, and then the coverage in the secondary, Kamari, Sting, Petrie, Eric Murray, were on the receivers and just made them, forced them to make some contested catches. And fortunately, we were able to either get a hand in there. He missed a few. So when you put all that together, that's why the result ended up the way that it did.
Yeah, D'Amico was talking about it. I know you want to see sacks. I know you want to see disruptive plays in the backfield, but disruption can happen in a variety of ways, right? Get the quarterback off his launching point, that kind of thing?
The discipline of the pass rush is important, and when you want to make sure against a quarterback like that, he doesn't have a lot of space. The times where he had some space or had an opening, or maybe the rush wasn't as coordinated as we would have hoped, he was able to squirt out of there, and he scrambled for however many yards. So, but then there were other times where we were rushing 4 or 5. We were able to stay in front, and he had to either find a launch point, move, couldn't see through the line, whatever it was. So that's where you talk about you're not necessarily getting sacks per se, but I think we ended up with 16, 17 total pressures. So we were disrupting the quarterback, and then when you tie in the tight coverage, that's good pass defense.
Nick, this is more about kind of procedural sort of stuff, but on Saturday we get email from Omar and PR that Aziz has been put on the injury report with an illness, and you don't know whether he's going to go. So when you go into a game, how far do you go down? Plan B, plan C, plan D. Well, if he can't go, okay, we've got to do this. Well, that might mean we got to take this guy from here, and we got to move this guy over here. Maybe this guy's inactive, because how tough does that become when it's just one player and that domino falls and maybe force you to do a lot of different things?
Yeah, usually Friday afternoon you kind of have the final injury report based on what happened during the course of the week, and if something happens between Friday evening into Saturday, from a compliance standpoint, like we have to report that to the league. So Aziz wasn't feeling well, so that's something that we had to disclose. And then the plan is, all right, if he can't go, what are our alternatives and options? Right. So I would say in that particular case, Billy, Matt, DR, get together. Here's how we're going to handle it. And I think the big thing is just don't blink. So whatever the circumstance and situation is, you just have to deal with it. You can't change it. You just have to find a solution. So I think we've talked about this on the show. It's just fix problems and find solutions. So even though it happens late, you're always prepared for a contingency if you have to go to plan B or whatever it might be.
Can you take us through some of the elements of when a player goes through what Nico went through, where, all right, he goes into the tent, there are conversations, the coaches have to adjust because maybe no longer a part of the game plan, you go to the locker room or not, that kind of thing?
Yeah, during the course of the game, you're going to probably have to modify some things as you go, whether it's schematically because the team is doing something maybe a little different than they showed, or you lose a player, so you have to adjust some calls. So that's part of coaching. It happens to essentially everybody in the league, so you just make some adjustments. Other people have to kind of assume that responsibility and role, not necessarily actual tangible production, but they have to assume the assignments and the responsibilities. So In that situation, in the second half, Nico wasn't available or whenever he got hurt, Hutch played a little bit more, made some plays, made a third down conversion there. Yep. So it's just being prepared. This is where you have to be able to rely on everybody that's at the game. They always have to be ready at a moment's notice for whenever the opportunity comes.
We've seen players go into the locker room before, though, and come back out and play. So how does that communication go with the medical staff?
Yeah, they get the information to DR and whatever respective side of the ball that is offense or defense to know, is he available? Is he going to return? Or he's still being evaluated further for some complication? So that information needs to get to the people that it affects the most, and probably Frank is involved in that as well, just given if they have a role in the kicking game. So it happens in real time. You have to be ready to adjust and adapt. So as long as we kind of know what the status and situation is, then we can adjust accordingly.
Nick, the last 35 seconds or so, just the way that you talked about those situations, as my wife has said, everything's a situation, but there are some that are more prevalent than others. How often do you guys go through different machinations of, even whether it's on the field or not, just discuss, hey, what would we do in this situation? We got 3 timeouts. We've got this. We got no timeouts. We got this. How often you guys kind of go through situations and look at other games that have happened to kind of help you kind of look at those scenarios that could possibly take place?
All the above. So during the course of the week, you have folks that are looking at what's going on in the league. This came up during the course of the game. Spend time with D'Amico during the course of the week. There's a specific time, kind of go through it, and then you're just prepared for, here's how we would handle that situation. And we've talked about this. You don't know when those situations are going to come up, but you want to be prepared, and you kind of have to talk them through as the game is going on in anticipation. You really got to stay 2-3 plays ahead. Okay, well, here's what it is, green light here, or if we get in a situation, be ready to call a time, whatever it might be.
Right.
But end of half, end of game, like the ability to execute in those situations, it's going to determine the fate of your team and kind of what happens during the course of the game. So for the most part, we did a pretty good job there at the end, which led to the result that it did.
Let's go through the DAR Gali appreciation question here, Nick, because another one this week, because we have role model players. Andre Johnson's in the Hall of Fame. Do what he did. Certain guys who have that kind of stature. Here's DAR, who is also a role model, right, with everything he contributes to the team in every way.
Dependable, consistent, reliable, professional, and he's been that way since we acquired him, however many years ago that was. So Darre's always been kind of a role player throughout the course of his career. When he's had to play offensively, which when you go back and look at his career in Tampa Bay, there was a period where he was essentially the third down back or the sub back, and he had to play a little bit on early downs as well. And he's been a very dependable, reliable, productive player in a kicking game as well. So his value is on fourth down. So typically your value on fourth down will determine how big of a role you may have offensively or defensively. And in our circumstance, we've been down running back wise, but DAR is always prepared. He's the model professionalism, how you want to handle yourself. I think D'Amico talked about this in terms of Robert Woods. Just for younger players, like what's the model? Robert Woods is the model. And I would say in a lot of respects, DAR fits that bill as well. He's always prepared. He's always ready to go. And it's important to have players like that you can count on in critical situations when you need them the most. And DAR over the last couple of weeks has been as instrumental in our success offensively as anybody.
Nick, Steph had a pretty solid ball game, and I know that's got to be tough when you face your former team in a sense, and we'll get to that in a little bit. But what do you think of the way Steph performed with all the emotion that he talked about after the game that he was sort of feeling in that game?
Yeah, Steph's handled himself in that game like he's handled himself when he walked in the building. I mean, he's been the same guy since we traded for him and acquired him. He's got a great attitude. He's emotional in a good way. He's very competitive. He cares a lot about winning. He wants to do the right things, and he's productive when he's on the field. So, I mean, I don't know how many targets he's had during the course of the year, but typically when the ball is thrown to him, he catches it. Yep. So talk about dependability and just making the plays when you need them. And a lot of his completions the other day were for first down. So credit to Steph. The way Steph practices is it shows up on game day. So there's a correlation between how you prepare and what you do during the course of the week and then what you end up doing on game day. And certainly he's a great example of that.
Nick, it's clear this team has a great positive attitude. There's something about it. It's the ultimate intangible. But can you speak to that a little bit, what you sense in this bunch last year and this year?
Yeah, I think people enjoy coming to the building, coming to work. And I think the environment that D'Amico creates is second to none. So he's got great energy. He's consistent. The players know what to expect on a day-to-day basis, what the standard of performance is. Here are the things that we need to improve and get better, and just be yourself. And just have a very, I would say, purposeful mindset when it comes to work, because in the end, it's about the work. So here are the things that we have to do each week in order to win the game. Make sure we're prepared, making sure that you go through your process and just have, fun doing what you're doing. So football is hard, life is hard, but there's no reason we need to make it any harder than it is. So create a good environment, provide the players with the resources that they need in order to be successful, and just try to have a positive attitude and just keep pressing forward and doing the right thing. So, I mean, it's a credit. It starts with D'Amico, and it's a credit to the players and the leadership that we have in place. That's the environment that we have in the building.
Okay, good Bills win. A win over the Bills. Excellent. 23-20. It's time to move on. I don't know if you knew this. We're going to a place called Foxborough. I don't know if you know how to
Never
get there.
heard of it, yeah.
So we won't ask you how to get there, but I would assume you know the team. Let's get into the scouting report of the New England Patriots, Nick.
Yeah, it's kind of interesting kind of studying them here a little bit over the last, few days, but it's almost a dichotomy of change versus continuity, because you kind of see a little bit of both. So starting with Gerard, I mean, Gerard's first year as a head coach, but has experience in the program, played there, his coach there. And then defensively, DeMarcus Covington's a defensive coordinator who we hired DeMarcus kind of as a defensive quality control assistant. It's kind of worked his way through the system. So they're a big part of, what goes on defense. And then in the kicking game, have a new special teams coordinator, Coach Springer, and then offensively, Coach Van Pelt come over from Cleveland, Buffalo. So it's a mixture of kind of new and old.
Right.
I would say they certainly have a number of things that they do well, starting defensively. Like they're a good team on defense, good front, multiplicity of fronts. And they have a lot of hybrid type players, if you will, kind of working back to front. We look at guys like Mapu and Jabril Peppers and Kyle Duggar, safety, kind of linebacker hybrid, but they can do multiple things well. Have a really good corner in Christian Gonzalez. I mean, matchup corner, he's really one of the better corners in the league. And then they kind of mix and move in between the nickel and the perimeter with Jonathan Jones, who's played inside over the course of his career. Jonathan was a really good kicking game player early in his career. And then Marcus Jones is kind of their slot corner, nickel corner, Houston kid who's also, he factors into the return game as well. He's their punt returner. So the secondary, kind of the back half, some hybrid players, but a lot of younger players, but do have experience in the front. A bunch of big guys inside, starting with Godshaw, Equale, guys like that. Keon White, I would say, is one of the better players on defense. He's very versatile. Lines up at outside linebacker, lines up at defensive end, rushes from the inside, but he's big, he's long, he's athletic. He can rush the passer. He can pressure the quarterback, really good player. Uche is a good pass rusher. So they get kind of contributions from a number of different players on the edge. And linebacker, they've kind of had to some turnover there because of the injuries. So Bentley's on IR, McMillan's been in and out. Tavai's been kind of a steadying presence there. So it's kind of a collection of players that can line up in multiple spots, younger players who have kind of grown up and developed in the system. They do a good job. They're good against the run. They don't give up a lot of explosive plays, and they've been able to take the ball away. And then offensively, I would say the two best players are really the backs, really, Gibby and Ramondre Stevenson. Stevenson is as good of a back there is, well-rounded, good balance, good body control, strong, tough, good player in the passing game. Signing Gibson in the offseason, who kind of is a change of pace guy. He's got some speed. Jacoby's done a good job. Jacoby hasn't turned the ball over, right? So he hasn't given it to the other team. I think their turnover margin, they're in the top 10 in terms of just the overall margin. So they haven't given it away, they've taken it away. So two good backs, good tight end, and Hunter Henry, who's very reliable, and then a receiver. Have a number of young players who they're kind of working through some things with. But Pop Douglas is a really good player, played well as a rookie, getting born back. So. In that offensive line, they've just had a number of players in there because of injuries. So they're just trying to kind of piece it together there. But a number of things that they do well. They run the ball really well. Offensively, they don't turn the ball over. And defensively, they kind of give you multiplicity of looks. And then in the kicking game, they got one of the best punters in the league in Behringer. So good specialist, good punter. And then the return specialist, talked about Marcus Jones, who's top 10 punt returner.
Oh, yeah.
And then Jermichael Hasty. So I would say they have good players. They've been in 3 one-score games, so went to overtime with Seattle, beat Cincinnati, and then kind of came down to the wire there against Miami last week. So it was a good football team, so we're going to have to go up there with the right mindset and be ready to go.
I've always thought it's the toughest road trip in the league, not just because Brady played there for a couple of decades, Nick, and you were there as well, but It takes a long time to get there from anywhere. You don't stay near the stadium. The flight, where do you land? Providence or Boston? A lot of complication there. Then you get there at night. There's the haunted house on the hill. When you were there, were you aware of that kind of element for the road teams?
Yeah, we weren't really too focused on that. We were just trying to make sure we were ready to play and ready to go, which I think that'll be important for our team this week. So can't necessarily worry about the logistics. Got a lot of great people that handle that. So go through your process during the week. Understand it's going to be a long flight, so do what you need to do during the course of the week to prepare, get your rest, make sure you're hydrated, and then get up and get ready to go against a good team who has a good track record at home.
So it's a place we've never won against a quarterback right now where we've only beaten him once, and that's Jacoby Brissett. So it's kind of a two-part question, Nick. Why is Jacoby difficult to face? If they do make the change and go to Drake May, what could we see with him?
Yeah, I think he's a pro, and Jacoby's got a big, strong arm. He's very tough, and historically, over the course of his career, he hasn't turned the ball over. So he generally makes good decisions. You know, which part of your job as a quarterback is to make good decisions, not give the other team the ball. So Jacoby's been a steady, reliable presence. He's got a great demeanor. He's got a great personality. He's got good leadership, which is probably the reason why that he's playing. And then when you talk about Drake, I mean, there's a reason he was drafted 3rd overall. And when you watch him play in the preseason, he played well. So big, strong, athletic, big arm. Does some things that a lot of the quarterbacks this day and age do to kind of the dual threat. Yep. So whatever the situation is, I mean, ultimately it'll be their decision. But we kind of have to prepare for everybody that could be at the game that's going to be available. And then just make sure that we're taking care of our business, doing the right thing, at least defensively, making sure we're sound in our techniques, understand the call, and just being able to go out there and execute.
All right, 2 things sampling your former local knowledge. You were there when the old stadium was there, and I think people don't understand how basic a setup that was in New England. Then they get the new stadium, and also that open area with the Longfellow Bridge, whatever that thing is. What about that?
Yeah, I'll kind of start. I think they've made some cosmetic adjustments to that end. I haven't really seen it since, but they've put a lot of resources into the stadium, the scoreboard, the open end, kind of done some things. So they've done a great job with the upkeep and just kind of developing. And then you have Patriot Place. It's very unique, I would say, area. The old stadium, my first year in the NFL, 2001, was the last year in Old Gillette Stadium, and it was bare bones. I mean, metal benches, so you're sitting, you're cold as hell. So.
A fence surrounding it.
It was an old school environment. So really the old stadium where the new stadium is, they were like right next to each other. So they kind of, raised the old stadium and then built a new stadium literally right next to it. So the new stadium's a little bit nicer than the old one.
Yeah, a little bit.
Sounds like it. Gerard Mayo's head coach, you saw him as a player. He's drafted, he plays. When did you know, or did you know, that he was going to be a head coach? Did he kind of exhibit those qualities as a linebacker right away? And what do you think about him taking over, obviously, after Bill Belichick did so much?
Yeah, when Gerard came in as a rookie, I mean, he kind of earned his stripes right from the get-go. I mean, very few players, I don't want to say it doesn't happen, but the fact that he was a captain on a rookie team, or as a rookie on that team, speaks to his leadership. So Gerard was a very smart player at Tennessee. And then when he showed up, he was a good football player in the SEC. And then his leadership and his production really stood out. And he has a way of connecting with a lot of people. So you saw that as a player. At the end of his career, he had to deal with some injuries. So then he kind of started to transition out. He spent some time in private business before he transitioned back. But he kind of started at the lowest level, came in as a quality control coach. Nothing was, he had to earn everything. Yep. Nothing was guaranteed. And he put a lot of work behind the scenes. And anytime that you're replacing somebody the caliber of Coach Belichick, it's never an easy situation. Right. But I think the important thing is he's kind of handled it and put his spin on the program and doing the things that he thinks are important. And making it his program, and you're starting to see that in terms of how they play. But Gerard's a really smart individual, really good person, good football player, and he's going to be a good head coach. He is a good head coach.
National media very focused on these games with Diggs playing his former teams, but we're focused on the Nick Caserio reality tour continuation because we had our time in the Cleveland area. Now we're going to New England.
Big year.
Yeah, so some of the memories you have just personally of being in New England, they have to be good ones. Obviously, on the field it was great, but you started your family there and everything like that.
Yeah, no, a lot of great memories. So, I mean, I met my wife, she worked for the organization. She was working on the partnership marketing, kind of the soccer, football side of it. So I met my wife. So, I mean, let's start there. Yeah. So nothing good has happened without her in my life. But with a lot of good memories. We didn't have to move around too much, but always enjoyed going into the city. The North End is really kind of unique. It's got the culture and just we always love going down to dinner down there. And fortunately, met a lot of good people while we were there. So we have nothing but great things to say about the area. We vacation over there during the summer. We go back to the Cape. So a lot of fond memories. So all of our children were born, in Boston as well. So, a lot of great experience, met a lot of great people, fortunate to be a part of a number of winning teams and a great organization, and was always treated well by the people there, starting with ownership, and Robert and Jonathan always treated me well, always gave me, the great opportunity, and, hopefully I did the right thing by them every step of the way.
Yeah, I think that's 100% in the affirmative. I'm going to ask you maybe something that might be a little weird, but when you said something about Gerard Mayo that stood out to me, he went into business you said he went into business and he came back. Does that resonate with you in a sense? The fact that you did that for a short amount of time before you really got and dove into the business, that maybe you get a little different perspective check. Does that kind of resonate with you when players do that, when they go out and see something different and come back to it?
Sure. Whatever you're doing, you have to make a decision. All right, where's my kind of life going to take me? And sometimes it's never linear. It's never a straight line. So, but when you're around football, like if you enjoy football and want to be immersed and want to be a part of it, then you have to make a commitment to it. So as Gerard was transitioning from playing to coaching, there was a window there where he was probably trying to figure out, what do I do next? But I think the fact that he made a decision to come back to football speaks to how much he loves football, how much he wanted to be involved. Right. And he's left a positive impression in the time that he's been there, both as a player and as a coach, as an assistant. And obviously he's putting his imprint on the program now as a head coach.
Great stuff, Nick. Thanks a lot. Good luck this week.
Thanks, fellas.